Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 300 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game. Are you ready to discover what your Knack for Business truly is? Your hosts are Bernie Franz-Grote from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You, Inc.
Today's topic is government contracting strategies for small businesses under new policies. Question for the audience: how can your small business successfully navigate and win U.S. government contracts in 2025 with all the new policy changes? That's what our guest is here to talk about. Mike Menahem from Govbidpro. He's the founder of Govbidpro, Inc., helping small businesses navigate and secure government contracts. With over 9 years at CF Motion, Inc., his team handled 200 plus RFQs annually. An RFQ is a request for quotation, winning 29 to 42 contracts each year. A subject matter expert in bid capture, proposal preparation, and contract management. He supports industries like IT, medical devices, construction, real estate, including women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and minority-owned businesses. His background includes leadership roles in banking, mortgage lending, excelling in home equity loan production, and branch management. Mike holds an MBA from Long Island University's CW Post College of Management and completed his undergraduate studies at UCF while working at Disney World. Now based in Albuquerque, he continues to help business win government bids while remaining a devoted Buffalo Sabres and Bills fan. Mike, welcome. Good to see you, man. You have a favorite quote or saying?
Do your best. That's what my mother told me. Just do your best.
In the world of applying for a contract and having worked inside a corporate space that had a procurement department, there's seems like a lot of depth and breadth to it. Is that intimidates most small businesses from applying for government bids and contracts?
That's a great question to start us off. And thanks, Bernie and Wayne, for having me on this podcast. I think what's intimidating for small businesses is just the amount of work that needs to be done. There's really three main areas. Number one is the registration, making sure you're all set to go in terms of registering on SAMDECA, which is free, and getting all your ducks in a row with your UEI and cage code and LLC and all that, corporate, all the documents and everything like that. The second piece really the biggest piece is the bidding piece. In looking at this question, what I'd like to say is what we're doing as small businesses is reacting to a solicitation by the government. The government's saying, please don't email us, please don't call us, because we'll get 1 million emails and 1 million phone calls. Here's a request for quote for widgets, for service, for cybersecurity, for medical devices. Please respond by next Friday. I think that's the process that's intimidating. In fact, I want to share a quick story. I was on a class. It was 1 hour a day, every day, about how to write a book. For me, it was like, wow, how do I write a book? That's a bit intimidating. But this guest speaker took us through the process. Knowledge is power. So now that I know how they have a process of how to write a book, I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. It's going to take some work if I decide to do it. So it's about knowledge. It's about training. We do have 14 on-demand training videos on our website. It shows you the process. The third piece I mentioned earlier is contract management, delivering product, invoicing the government, which is not as hard as it sounds, but now you've got a contract, now you got to deliver the goods. So really it's knowing the process and the knowledge and the training and just going, oh, okay, this is how the government operates. It's also because we have a knack for media and YouTube and the news, we see these actors, the Donald Trumps, the Joe Bidens, the Barack Obamas. That's not who runs the government. And that's not who we are going to sell to. The contract managers that are civilian, that are sitting at these Air Force bases and Army bases and USAID and National Institute of Health, which we'll talk about later, that's who you're working with. And they're just regular people like you and I.
Like different world since January in your business?
Absolutely. So obviously, as we know, Donald Trump won the election and there's going to be some cuts. What the government's going to look for is subject matter experts, particularly in a few areas. Number one, cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. They're going to make investment with that. There will be medical For PTSD for veterans, I don't think that's going to get cut. Homeland Security, Border Patrol, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later on. The products and services for those folks. So again, you want to be targeted. You want to target DOD, Defense. You want to target DHS, Homeland Security, Border Patrol. You want to target FEMA for emergency, the hurricane relief, and the fires in Los Angeles, and the hurricanes in Florida.
If you have into a client right now that does particularly, they're electricians basically, from a trade standpoint, but their job is to remove trees that have landed on electrical cables.
So again, if you're a subject matter expert at something, construction is going to be big. Auditing, if you've got a particular product, service and you want to target an agency, I think that's the direction that we're headed, even though there'll still be bids out there.
What industries are you seeing that have the most opportunities now on this new landscape?
IT, of course, is always going to be big because of the technology advancement. Now, I mentioned cybersecurity earlier. I want to dip a little further into it. You've got virtual reality and augmented reality. The government wants to know about all this stuff, the artificial intelligence and the chat GPT, that they want to know, hey, the point is that they don't want this stuff landing in the wrong hands. And next thing, you've got a robot that can hit a button and then start World War III. You don't want that. So the government wants to get involved. They're usually about 6 months behind, unfortunately. They want to make investments. And now you've got companies like the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world building data centers that take up a bunch of electricity. The government wants to know about that because that's going to take a toll on the infrastructure. You're going to see government get involved with infrastructure projects, our electronic backbone, that kind of thing. From a medical standpoint, that's the IT piece. Simulation, augmented reality, and virtual reality we mentioned. Medical, I don't see an administration that's going to cut the Veterans Administration. No administration ever has. It's bad politics, you know what I'm saying? It's just a bad move. So you're going to see increases. Our VA is the biggest healthcare system in the world, supports the veterans. So you're going to see definitely medical, nurse staffing, and those type of products and services there. Construction we're going to see as well. Real estate, I think that we're also going to see the sale of real estate. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is the deferred resignation. You're going to have certain government employees, a handful of them, of the 2.3 million that are on payroll, take the deferred resignation, they take the severance package. Certain office buildings aren't needed. The Trump administration will put those commercial buildings, office buildings, warehouses on auction. Legally, they have to put it in auction to make it fair for everybody. If you want to bid, highest bidder, it's a sale of government property. So we're going to see that. Auctioneers, people that do digital auction sites, those type of things. So that's the direction we're going. The goal is to trim $100 trillion of spending over the next 10 years, which is certainly possible if you're Elon Musk. That's what's going on.
Walk me through the steps to qualify for contracts. What is the process?
Sure, policy, not politics. So in other words, we're assuming this is going to happen in the next 6 months, a year. By knowing what we've seen in the last 20 years or so, I think this is what's going to happen. Let me talk to you about process. Number one, the registration needs to happen, and there's a special registration for companies in Canada. CAGE code, it stands for Commercial and Government Entity for companies in the United States. What they're looking for is that you're not in Syria, Russia, Iran, North Korea. They want to make sure that your taxes are paid. You don't have any unpaid child support. They're checking your background. They're making sure that you have an office in Buffalo or Clearwater, Florida, or in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Let's talk about the process of the bidding itself. We call it find, process, send. We try to keep it simple because there's enough going on in the world and we're all busy small business owners. You want to find the right bid. That's called bid capture. You go into sam.gov, and this is something that we can do for you. It's a service, and you find the bid that is due in the future. So you look for, let's say, bids that are due next Friday or next Thursday. I like to go about a week out, maybe 2 weeks out. And you're going by what's called a North American Industry Code Standard, NAICS code, NICS code, North American Industry Code Standard. Let's say you're in real estate that has a 6-digit number. That's the NICS code. You would put that in the search and be like, oh, these are the bids for real estate. Here are the bids for IT. Here are the bids for medical devices. Then you go through the bid At the top is the title, then there's the due date, then there's the classification if it's set aside for small business, then there's a description. It goes into it. The government's not going to pay for just a couple bullet points. It's lowest price technically acceptable, LPTA, or it's subjective. They'll tell you no more than 10 pages, PDF, 12-point font. They're red tape. And it's cross the T's and dot the I's. Bid will be accepted later than noon Friday. They'll give you the due date. There's no pre-bid meeting. They'll break it down. There's the main points. When it's due, it's really 3 or 4 things. When it's due, what you got to send in, and is there a pre-bid meeting? Is there an amendment that I need to sign? There's a form that, very important, it's SF standard form. It stands for standard form, SF 1449. Does that need to be signed? Some contract managers say yes, some say no. That's what makes our job hard, is that it's different every time. You've got this bid and you're selling these widgets, figure out your cost of project. That's what I tell my clients. What's your cost of project? 100,000, 100 million. Now you want to put on your profit margin. What's your cost of money? And we'll get into this later about suppliers and the credit and all that. Are you borrowing money? If you're a construction company that has to build a bridge for the government, and you have to borrow money to build the bridge, to pay for the labor, and then invoice the government. So you've got to think about those things as you're bidding. Now you submit the bid and very politely say, please let us know you've received this. I like to send it in about 2 to 3 days early. If it's due Friday, I'm going to send it in 2 or 3 days before. So that's 80% of the work. The other piece is the contract management. There is contract modification that goes into some of these deals. And then invoicing the government, there's a special place. It's a website. It's called White Area Workflow. They changed it recently to PI. The WAWF stands for White Area Workflow. You have to register there, and your purchase order is sitting there waiting. And here's your invoice, and it has to connect. It has to all line up. And then it gets sent to DFAS, Defense Finance and Accounting Service in Columbus, Ohio, for you to get paid.
Having worked in a healthcare institution, I actually could follow that bouncing ball of T's and I's, either dotted or crossed, or in your eyes, your actual physical eyes crossing, just for the heck of with the transition. And anytime there is a government change, there's always a transition. And so whether it's south of the border, north of the border, anywhere in the world. If you've put in for a bid and there's been I know there's ongoing transitions happening, and without getting into the meat of that, if someone bids on something, how do you know that the person you were talking to yesterday is there tomorrow? In other words, what I'm getting at is the continuity. The person could have left on their own steam. They could have won that lottery ticket, or that bus found them. So how do you ensure continuity of the transaction?
Great question. Let's say I'm working with a contract manager. Let's just pick up Air Force Base that I've worked with recently, Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. I'm not going to mention names, but the contract manager there is a civilian. And let's say she decides to take this deferred resignation or wins the lottery and walks away. Very importantly, the property of us government, the email, the computer at her desk, at her office in Lackland Air Force Base, that's the property of the U.S. government. So what happens is, in terms of continuity, all her work will be transferred over to other people at Lackland Air Force Base. They're also civilians. Let's safely assume not the entire department of the IT procurement department for purchasing at Lackland Air Force Base is going to take this deferred resignation. Somebody's going to stick around, and if they all do, they're going to find a replacement. Now, let's say you get stuck into a situation, you would hire a company like ours to say, okay, let's do some digging. You can always go to the Small Business Administration. They're open, they're not closing, and there is so many Small Business Administration representatives, not only by location in terms of state, but also by sector, by NICS code. We mentioned that earlier, the North American Industry Code Standard. So let's say it's IT, medical, or construction, take your pick, and you're selling these product and or service to the government. In this case, it's this Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, and this contract manager leaves and you can't get a hold of anybody. You would hire me to start pounding the pavement and talk to the Small Business Administration. They have a copy of your contract, of your bid. They've got a copy of everything. They can do some digging on that. The result that you're looking for is that you're going to be assigned another contract manager. It could be another Air Force base. It could be somebody else at that Air Force base. Someone's going to take care of it. Some of these bases, Army, Navy, Air Force, National Guard, Coast Guard, and Clearwater have a small business person assigned. It's a manager for all the micro and small businesses. That's their job, is to handle all the small businesses. But they're basically an ombudsman. If there's any issues like conflict, like, oh, you didn't pay me enough, or maybe there's a contract modification. We saw a lot of this. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too far here, but because of COVID, there's a lot of changes. A lot of facilities got closed and inventories dropped. For example, we had a contract modification where we shaved half the quantity of this purchase order from 16 to 8. We were talking to the small business rep at this Navy base. They were assigned to us to mediate this modification. So there is someone on base for the small businesses.
Do you work with colleagues in other countries to facilitate this process going smoother?
Yes, absolutely. Companies in other countries can participate, and it doesn't have to be North America, Canada, Mexico, what have you. They can do teaming agreements. So we did have one deal. I'll give you an example. We had a company in Europe. And so what we did is we set it up where the company in Tampa, Florida was the prime contractor, landed the contract and imported this product, white labeled it, put their name on it, guaranteed it with the warranty, and sold it to the government. They get paid and paid their supplier in Europe, but hey, it's your product. You're putting your name on this thing. That's one strategy. I could take a company in the United States that will be the point of contact, domestic, and we'll put our name on the product.
Are there common mistakes that you see within country that the companies are making when they're applying for bids? Or are there just like 2 or 3 key things that people usually screw up?
Absolutely. The government, as we talked about earlier, a lot of red tape. Let's dive in terms of an RFP, something that's subjective, right? And so let's say it's auditing, training, or some kind of service provided to the government. So the government's going to ask for 3 pieces: technical, past performance, and a price. The problem I'm seeing is that my clients may not have enough information in terms of technical or past performance. That's a big one. They don't have any past performance within the government. So work with what you've got. What's your past performance in the private sector? To try to provide as much as possible. Take me, for example. I worked at Disney World. I parked cars at Disney World when I was in college, but I still worked at one of the biggest companies in Florida. It's 40,000 employees. Everybody knows Disney. That's a positive, and people can relate to that. You worked at IBM, you worked at Dell, you worked at a municipality or the electric company. Doesn't matter. Put it down. And that contract manager's going, hey, this is some pretty cool experience. That you went through something. You navigated an experience that somebody else doesn't have. So past performance is a big thing. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I worked at this. I worked in lawn maintenance. Price is a huge thing. Another piece that folks skip is the terms. When is your price good until? What's your deadline? Is it good for 30 days, 45 days? The price that you're offering. Are you offering it in continental U.S. or the entire United States, including Guam, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the territories? Is your product new? You've got to just spell the stuff out. Believe it or not, again, government being bureaucratic, you got to spell it out that the product that I'm offering, the product that I'm using, the projector that I'm using at this training is brand new. Okay, it's not brand new. They may want to keep the projector, or they're using their projector. So it's through a fine comb. And in terms of net 30, you got to put that down, put net 30 terms. Sometimes you'll see this in SLED, state local education. The government says, hey, we need net 45 or net 60, especially school districts. School districts love net 45, net 60. It just gives them more float. So you want to spell those things out. And then signing stuff. There's a very important form, SF 1449, standard form SF 1449 that has to be signed at the bottom. I've done a bunch of these, as you can imagine. 15A, 15B, put your name, sign, and date. And of course, name, address, cage code, UEI number, and then just make sure to sign that. People forget to do that, and they say, I sent a PDF. Okay, you got to send the SF 1449. It's bureaucracy. That's the way the government works.
Both Bernie and I are in Canada, so we only see an outsider's view. But it seems here there is a sense that there's an emergency happening. There is no status quo. How do you even navigate a government that may not exist?
And Wayne, thank you for that question. From what I'm seeing in my experience in the last 18 plus years of doing this, I was volunteered at CF Motion. My third day on the job, I was at a trade show in Orlando, and we were based in Clearwater. And next thing, we're doing 200 bids a year and winning so many purchase orders. This is the Obama years, which were consecutive. In this case, we're not seeing it consecutive. To answer your question, I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation. For example, I don't think there's going to be a complete shutdown of USAID. There is some wrongdoings, some waste there that we want to cut, but USAID will go under the State Department portfolio, for example. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, that's a good agency that was created by the Obama administration that protects the consumer. I see something like that going into like a SBA or something like that, or again, being consolidated under an agency. Here's something that could be completely cut. During the Biden-Harris administration, you had funding opportunities within the Department of Energy, electric vehicles, solar panels, windmills, green energy. This administration is for the oil, and this administration is a little bit different. If the strategy for small businesses to say, number one, I need to be a subject matter expert. I can't sell something that is sold on Amazon. Number two, focus and be proactive with targeting, let's say, the DOD or the Homeland Security, DHS, or Veterans Administration, not energy, not education. I think this administration, whether we agree with it or not, says it's about the local municipalities, that parents should educate their children, not a centralized government in DC that doesn't know what's going on in Lakeland, Florida, or Manhattan, Kansas. So this is what they promised, and this is what they're going to do.
So if you had you were successful at a bid, and this happened prior to the transition of January, and then someone comes along and says, listen, I'm thinking like, for example, grain farmers. Sorry, you're not getting the money. We're not shipping it overseas. And they've been dependent on this more than just one administration. Without getting into that element too deep, if you've won a bid and you've done everything right, and all of a sudden someone says, listen, we're turning it off. This is due to administrative changes, but let's say you don't need lifeboats or a certain product anymore. It doesn't make sense to carry on with it. How secure is the deal? Is it built into the terms that at any point in time we reserve the right to pull back? Is that part and parcel? Because the devil's in the details. Is that something that people should be mindful of?
Great question. Number one, the contract or purchase order. Purchase order is just a one-time thing. Hey, we're going to buy 100 laptops. Here's a purchase order. You deliver the laptops, you're done. We pay you. A contract is usually sort of for like cybersecurity. It's a 5-year contract, and the government reserves the right to exercise year 2. That's standard. Now let's get into it. Let's say you mentioned farmers or lifeboats. The government has to come to you and say, we know that you have to deliver these lifeboats by March 14th, but we don't want you to do that. So they have to, because of FAR, stands for Federal Acquisition Regulation, and in the Defense Department, it's DFAR, that's built into the contract. So within the contract, like you said, the devil's in the details. Within the FAR, it says that this small business has the right to provide a proposal for cancellation for convenience of both parties. If the small business, let's be honest, we really don't have a choice. The small business can get a cancellation fee. So in other words, okay, we're going to cancel, we're going to pay you X amount, but we're not going to buy these. I had a situation, let me give you an example. And this is a couple of years ago, even before this transition, there was a company that sold books, and these books were about cybersecurity. And the government had to move some money around. That's what the guy told me. Even over the phone, we were like, look, there has to be a contract modification. He says, yes, there is. Within the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, in the contract says, because you're a small business, you're entitled to a cancellation fee that's negotiable. Give us a proposal, a one-pager, about what this deal cost you, right? What is the administrative cost of putting a bid together? How many bids do you do? What is this cost of this project? What was your anticipated revenue? That kind of thing. And we'll give you, say, 25% of that as a cancellation fee. A firm like us can go through that process for this small business. It can be a long process, but it doesn't hurt your past performance that you canceled because they chose. It's just a cancellation for convenience of both parties. That's how it's worded.
So when you're helping a client, let's say I'm proposing to sell widgets. These widgets have utility that wanes over time. Do you build in, unforeseen, of course, a long period of time if you know it's not going to be needed? But in that process, because you're doing a budget, you're doing a planning, you're going to supply something. Do you also factor in that at any point in time, there might be an exception piece coming into play? So in other words, don't count all your eggs till they're hatched and understand that this might terminate and this is what you should be asking for. It's a 5-minute warning for a kid. It's time to go to bed. Do you build in 5-minute warning?
So look, there's a couple pieces to that. The government already knows that there's warranty and training. For example, we had a client that's in printers and then sold 10 3D printers to the government, had to you're selling the product, installation, training, and warranty. So it's all right there. They already know, hey, look, we need training, we need warranty, 3-year warranty on brand new equipment. So they're anticipating that. To answer your question, let's say you land a contract, you're a small business and you're doing some kind of audit service. That's going to be big now, right? Auditing or training. The government's big on training and it's a 5-year contract. You build it in that they could, in year 2, exercise the right not to extend to year 3. So you want to build it in. So you don't want to take revenue projections from year 3, 4, and 5. You might get a year or 2 out of this. Or look, we're going to have an election in 3+ years, right? 3+ of campaigning and all that. So you do want to anticipate, but they can't just walk away. It's not like a B2B where small businesses sign a contract and they're like, oh, sorry, we can't keep going. We have to terminate. The government's still dependable. It's still a good contract. I think that we're right now going through a volatile time. That's all.
I think volatility might sometimes be more present, but it's always there, regardless of where you are, what you're doing. A tsunami hits the side of your country or your shop, you're not in play anymore. Stuff happens.
I'm totally out of my depth. I can't even imagine it.
So decision timelines, that was another thing. Having been involved on the procurement side for a government-supported agency here in Canada, everything has to go back to the procurement department. It's not back to the person that's requesting, not the stakeholder or stakeholders. How do you follow up on where we at? Go, no go, still in between decisions, trying to figure stuff out. And again, outside of even the political spectrum, because these things can happen at any point in time. We're not sure yet, and we don't know when to pull the trigger. What's the best way to stay? Are we in the game or not?
Great questions. Let's work through the timeline. At the beginning, when it's a bid on SAM.gov, the government will say in plain English, this solicitation does not constitute that the government is going to issue a contract or purchase order. It does not entitle anyone to anything. It doesn't obligate the government to issue a contract. What they're saying in there, right, is, hey, you're taking the risk of giving us, taking the time to put a bid together, to put a proposal together. I have a client in the Cincinnati area. It's an MSP, managed service provider. We really have 3 groups. We have small businesses that have a contract. They're like, hey, what's going on with my contract? We talked about that a little bit earlier. We have the second group that did a bunch of bids last year. Some are my clients. They are like, hey, what's going on with my bid? My contract manager decided to take the severance. And then the third group is they have no bids, they have no contracts. They want the training on the new way that the U.S. government's going to do business. Again, going back to the bid itself, the government is not, you're taking the risk as the small business. You've got to factor that risk in. If you're going to take 2 days or a week or 2 weeks to put a proposal together, and that's why a lot of times they take outsourced service like ours, Govbidpro, where we're their B2G sales manager. They're saying, hey, let's outsource it, pay this guy fractional, and we don't have to spend 2 weeks putting a proposal together for custom software. The other piece that alleviates the risk, I think, is, and this has just been my philosophy from day one, from 18 years ago, is high volume. Lots of bids. You never know. Is there follow-up? Yes. Do they have to get back to you? No, they don't. They try to tell you, hey, no emails, no phone calls. What I'd like to do is there's 2 pieces. Either the government goes by LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable, and they'll email you a PDF, say, hey, you were not the lowest price. There you go. You have your answer. You didn't win. The second piece is more subjective and gives the contract manager a little bit more leeway in terms of who they pick. What we're seeing, the government's doing a lot of Microsoft Teams. So you'll submit a bid and they'll say, hey, we want to have a meeting. They want to meet with you and talk to you for half an hour because we can virtually. I'm in New Mexico, you're in Canada, we can talk, right? They're leveraging technology with that. The other piece that alleviates the risk is I tell clients and I tell small businesses that I meet, go after the RFIs. RFIs, request for information, the sources sought, the market research, the pre-solicitation, the bid. What's happening is the government had a meeting and they said they want cybersecurity services. So they're going out to the market, to what's called industry. They're saying, hey, send us a 10-page capability statement about what kind of cybersecurity services you can offer us. All you're sending them is a capability statement or a 10-page, and they'll tell you, hey, 10 pages, this is the type of agency you're going to provide cybersecurity for. We're a VA hospital, for example, protecting patient records, that kind of thing. Now you're talking about healthcare. So you're getting in front of the bid. That's what's important. Now you're getting in front of them and they're picking your brain. You know ahead of time that the real bid, the RFP, is going to come out in April because that's after the budget hits. We're going to talk about this later. It's a continuing resolution. Now your foot's in the door. So that's a strategy is to do the request for information, the sources sought, the market research, bids, not just the RFQs and RFPs.
But it sounds like the whole procurement process sounds very similar to everybody else. Just from the subjective side of what I've seen done, you have a rating scale, and then you just do the agency, the person looking to acquire the goods in concert with stakeholders and the procurement department will do a ranking. Once it's set, you can't jiggle it again. Are you also open to freedom of information requests?
Yes, absolutely. That's still going on. That hasn't been tampered with or anything like that.
The other thing I came across is that sometimes, like when you like an RFI, sometimes that could be a casual conversation. You're talking to a buddy in the industry, whether it's tech, motor pool, or even a retailer of motor vehicles. And they go, someone casually asks a question, and it's probably the genesis of the next series of questions that will be formalized. If I have a contact and I meet with them with no ill intent, I just happen to know the person through regular means.
Sure.
Is there a conflict of interest if they start engaging in the conversation? So in other words, you're a small, medium business, somebody's in their space and they say, yeah, I can fix that. They will go through the proper channels to address it. Is that a problem if that person applies? Someone's made that cross connect. I know during the horse race, you're not allowed to have that chat. Well, at least
Right. Yeah. Look, there's companies that are much larger than my clients. My sweet spot is like 25 employees or less. I do have some clients that are bigger than that, but the bigger companies, the 50, 100, 200 employee companies, they have sales reps and those sales reps create relationships with contract managers, procurement managers at Army, Navy, Air Force bases. I know of sales reps, business development managers, you call them whatever you want, that they're assigned the Air Force. They're assigned the Social Security Administration. That's their job, is to sell whatever that company sells. And they create that relationship. So that's still going on. That contract manager still has to go through the RFP process of putting the bid out open market. It's got to be lowest price. Look, I've been there where one of my clients won and the other small business didn't win. We ended up winning. Sometimes the contract managers, you know what I need? I need a woman of own business. I need to satisfy that bucket, that better known business that's set aside. And it turns out that the other company, grow businesses, is less than 25 employees, which is set aside, tends to happen also. But again, back to your question, is that relationship, that could still exist as long as everything is above board and gets put into the RFP process. You can go through SAM.gov, or sometimes they go through the GSA contracts, the GSA e-buy. It's up to the contract manager, but that solicitation process still happens.
Mike, is there anything else you'd like to make us aware of?
No, I think we covered a lot. One more thing, we really dealt with just the federal government. I'm telling clients and prospects to pivot, to also take a look at their local governments, their municipalities, state, local education, airports, police, universities, state universities, that's a big market there. The finance departments, the health departments are big. So take a look at that. And they like to buy local.
And how do we get a hold of you?
Sure. Website is Govbidpro, Govbidpro.com, Govbidpro.com, or my email is Mike, Mike, at Govbidpro.com, or just give me a call. Phone number is 505-585-1749. That should do it. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got 18,400 connections on LinkedIn. I'm also big on Alignable, so you can find me.
I want to say thank you to Mike Menahem, Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. Listen, if you want to do business in the States, still open for business. But if you have a product or service, whether you're in the U.S., continental, or part of one of the territories, North America, or the globe, reach out to Mike. He can help guide you on the path to both federal, state, and local entities in that space.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motivateyou.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motivateyou.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.